well, I wish you would do this or put that ahead of this. That's not really what I want to do. All I really want to do is see that you're making some progress, that you're applying some rules to how we trade and what we trade, and that it becomes more clear. Now, what's clear to me may not be clear to you. So that's why I'm not going to critique so much the format. If there's anything really wrong, and I didn't see anything wrong in the trading plans that I looked at prior, but I mean, really the principles that you guys are all listing are fine. The deal now is, can you translate that into action and into something that's coherent enough that you can actually follow it? So I'm a believer that simpler is better, and I'm a picture person. So you've seen my plan, and really what you see in my plan is stripped out just for illustration purposes, and it's got the basic nuts and bolts. It doesn't go into near the detail that some of your plans have, and that's fine, because essentially I'm just trading those same patterns that you see in the plan. So that's really all I wanted to check with, and so as you guys are making revisions to your plans, kick them over to me, and let me look at them. Other than that, I don't really have anything else that I wanted to comment on. I do, however, want to ask one more question. Now, guys, give me some open feedback here. How many of you trade options?
I don't.
I don't.
I don't.
4 of you do not trade options?
Correct.
Are you interested at all in options?
I would be interested in learning a little bit about it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Neil, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike, I can. Welcome.
Thank you. I'd be very glad to send anybody out an introductory piece on options, if there's an interest. The magic of this all is that, gentleman, that Neil is the resident expert on E-minis, and I steal shamelessly from his cup more often than I ought. And my background is options, so I'm coming into your playground wanting to know about E-minis, and then my background is options, which I've been trading for 10 years, 11 years, and they're pretty good. They're a pretty good approach into the stock market if done correctly. So I think that's what Neil and I were talking about that today, and thought there might be an opportunity for some synergy there.
How do we get about letting you know to send something to us?
Well, with Neil's permission, I don't know, Neil, can I give an email?
Oh, certainly. If these guys are okay with it, absolutely.
That dog scared me half to death. I hope he's on a leash.
I'm sorry, I'm muted. I'm sorry.
No, he's fine. He's fine. I just jumped a foot and then I realized he can't bite me. The name is Michael Batty, and the email is as simple as Michael Batty, MICHAEL BATTY at earthlink.net.
Mike, 2 things. The email that I sent you all actually had Mike in the header, and if you don't, you can type it in. Mike, you can type it into the chat box down here as well, and then it'll stay. Pardon me?
I'm showing where the chat box says Meet Now, Organizer Neil, and it says Waiting to View Your Screen.
Okay, there should be a chat box down there where you can.
Oh, I found it. Okay, sorry.
There you go.
So
You can just type your email in there, hit return, and it'll sit up there in the dialog box until we close the program.
I've got 4 screens running, and it was up in the 4th one, Neil. So I apologize.
No. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, gentlemen, incidentally, when I teach my classes, which I will be doing, I ask who wants to know about E-minis, and I have to be careful about that because there's a flocking to the door from people raising their hands and saying, "Show me and tell me," and let's get Neil signed up for it. So I surely think you're in the right place for learning an exciting principle of marketing.
Hear everything.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Please.
Okay,
It's very sensitive.
guys, any questions on the day?
Actually, I have a question.
Yes, Jose.
I was telling the guys one of the things that happened to me today that threw for a loop and actually can allow me to take probably the best trade that I could have took. And I could have took just one trade. That would be the end of it. So can you tell me what's wrong with this setup? I'll tell you which one it is.
Do you want me to give you the screen, Jose, and you can.
If you want to, that'll be fine.
Let's do that. I'll just give you control, and you can project your screen.
I'm sorry. Neil, that's me. My
Okay,
bad.
Fax, you should be there. You go, partner.
See it?
I can.
Okay, so
You the man.
I was up at this time, which in fact I think you were up too, because I think I was online that early. And I saw a head and shoulders set up here. That's
Yeah,
the
you
head.
did.
It says shoulder up there now, but because it's part of a different thing. So I saw, especially, coming into this area where I would think it would be resistance. So I saw one shoulder, I saw the head forming, I saw the other shoulder, I then saw that it came back, and I saw that this was being negated, so I actually entered here as short. As obviously I counted trade, thinking that it was gonna, come down. And obviously it stopped me out. I had my stop up here, and it stopped me out. And then you could, after I tell you what I went through, you could then comment on it. And then as I watched it and I was licking my wounds, I saw this one set up. One shoulder, the head, second shoulder, breaks the neck, comes back. I was going to enter here, but because of what happened here, I didn't. And obviously the rest is history.
As they say.
Yeah, I mean, you can trail it all the way down to, to over here. What was wrong? What should I have looked at? Other than this double bottom here that might have given me a heads up.
Yeah.
What was wrong with this picture?
This is the one thing. Not a whole lot, Mike. Not a whole lot. If you were to scroll or compress this a little bit, in fact, go to a 2-minute rather than the 1, and let's look at the same time period. Okay, and let's go back and look at this. There really wasn't anything wrong with this per se. You had to shake out. It came down to support. You had to retest. If we walk through this facts from the start to the end, okay, and we do the analysis on it. Okay, you look at this thing, and if I go up to give keyboard and mouse.
Yeah, let me give you.
And just give it to all of us, and then I can.
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Can you guys see this move now?
you should have it.
Okay, I'm moving. And you guys see it moving? I'm just basing in here. I know I see you moving facts.
Yeah, I didn't, actually, I moved it because I don't see you moving it. Does
Okay.
everybody else see you moving?
I saw it.
Okay. Okay. You know, really, if you look at this thing now, and you go back over to where you've drawn your lines, and you look at this time at 425, 420, whatever, this little pivot high, we come back down. Okay, bring your mouse down over here, more to the left. More to the left. Two more pivots. Come down one more. One more. Up, 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 up. Down to the next pivot. There you go. Up, right there, right there. Okay, let's go through the analysis here. We've got a double bottom, okay? We come up, we've got 100% retracement. We take out resistance. All of this shows me the strength that I want to see. We have a pullback that comes at, 435-ish, 440-ish. Little bottoming tail there on the two. Right, yep, right there. Comes down into congestion. See, this is all textbook still. This is exactly what we want to see. And the nice thing is that big red bar next to the bottoming tail really gets reversed quickly. And that's what we want to see. I don't like seeing 3 or 4 bars to reverse, to show the strength that we want to see. I like this sort of a thing where we reverse quickly. So as I just walk through the whole step by step and look at this from the formation, I like the double bottom. I like that we took out the resistance over here, pull back to support, bounce off the support on a bottoming tail, and just shoot through the next pivot high. Have a little consolidation, perfect. The next pushes up into some overhead resistance, yep, right up there. And now we go sideways, and it's okay to deteriorate like this. This little double bottom that you talked about, yep, right there, that still doesn't really concern me for a trend change, because all it does is come down to this lower base in that 133.72 area, 75 area. So I still like that holding base. Double bottom gives me the same ideal. Pops up, we got almost 100% retracement, minus a few ticks. So I'm going to call that essentially pretty close to 100% retracement. That gives me the strength that I want to see. So this shoulder that you're talking about, Fax, no. That one should be, in fact, that one did play long. So tell me, where did you, you were shorting that, right? You were shorting over here at 755, right? Yeah, right in there. Is that where you were shorting? Oh, I can't hear you, partner. You got to slide up to the chair.
I had the mic off. What I did was green bar ignored, try to go up, because I was looking at the 1 minute. I saw it come down, saw that it couldn't muster on what I thought was the shoulder. Then the red bar, green bar ignored,
Okay.
broke the bottom of it, so I entered about a true line.
Okay.
Sure.
Well, see, here's the facts. Here's what I'm going to suggest that you consider doing, and that is get rid of the 1 minute for your primary setup. Use it only to find your entry, and don't take your formations and your setups off the 1 minute. The reason being is you get far too many setups on. You can get setup after setup on the 1 minute, and yet you're fighting at either a 2 or certainly often a 5. And as we go through the analysis, click back on your 2 minute and just pull that up on the front. As we go through the 2 minute analysis, there really isn't. I can understand, your thinking there, but if you're looking at a 2 minute, a shakeout is forming on this 2 minute. We're still in a 5 minute uptrend, and we're still relatively in a 2 minute uptrend. I mean, we did break, we kind of broke that pivot. I mean, that's not much of a pivot over here at about 13,385. that when it pulled back just before 450, that's not a huge pivot. A little bit more to the left. One more pivot. That basing, keep on going. That stuff right there, that's not really much of a pivot. In fact, it's not a pivot at all because we don't create a lower low in there. All we create is a small area of congestion. So, technically it really isn't a pivot. And regardless of how you look at it, that 5 minute certainly isn't in any jeopardy of a downtrend. The 2 minute, is it or is it not? I don't know. But I can see that 1 minute head and shoulders that you're dealing with. But the thing that worries me, as I mentioned, is we had enough. First off, Mike or Jose, is that look how things responded. And in fact, I'm going to take this away from you and draw some lines and do some things if that's okay.
That's fine.
Make Neil the presenter. I think that's what we're going to try to do. Okay. All right. Show my screen. Which one am I going to show? Let's go to number 1. Okay. Let's go over and get this, and we'll go find that very trade. Now I'm going to get rid of these pivot lines because we just don't need them for the purpose of this illustration. All right, let's go back and let's go talk about this right here. And this is I'll stay with the 2 minute. Okay, but let's kind of walk through this whole process. And here's what. And again, this is how I read it. We've got our double bottom. We have now a new high, a higher high. The pullback comes and is quite controlled into an area, and again, this is just an area of congestion. It holds quite well, blows through it. So we've clearly got ourselves in an uptrend. And this little area of congestion here, really, as I say, isn't technically a pivot. And the good part is this thing really stops at that high, at that prior pivot high. So as we look at these, and again, this is why, to me, the typical pristine definition of this pivot being invalid doesn't fly with me, because I find this to be a reference far too often. Because there is no reference in this 2 minute strong wide range bar. There's a complete void between here and down to the bottom. Yet prices are able to stabilize here, and they do that far too often for this to be invalid. So with the double bottom in and of itself is something that would give me pause. And this move up here tells me I've got strength, because it's not 100% technically. I mean, we miss it by a couple of ticks. It's darn close. So that's the part that would have given me pause to take this little deal as a head and shoulders. And I know we had a failure right here, but we're still in an uptrend. So if you don't, again, you obviously you would have covered this thing fairly quickly, and away you go. I don't. Go ahead.
What is about that setup that you wouldn't think that a double top or triple top would come into play there?
Well, it could have. It could have. I would have liked, and here's the thing about shock bars, okay? And essentially, this is a 2 minute, and essentially, guys, this is one of the rules that I have about shock bars. I don't like them. In fact, let me pull this over so we actually see them in more real time. This is less preferred to have it this far down in the move. I've got support right here, and granted, this could work, but I like them a little bit higher. I like them a little bit higher. This isn't the worst shock bar in the world. But I do like to see them up here closer to the tops, and we're gonna look at one here a little bit in a minute in our process. But you know, the only thing that gives me pause with this whole setup is that I've got this little shakeout. I've got this little breakdown. Things didn't stop at support. Okay, we get this little breakdown failure here, and this retest. There's no follow through to this, and this is what becomes the shakeout that we all recognize is our trend is still up, and though Head and Shoulders is a function that can and often does reverse a trend. I don't like them on a 1 minute. I don't even like them on a 2 unless they've had plenty of time to set up. And this doesn't really meet our definition of a Head and Shoulders, and only because it didn't come down far enough to test our neckline. So if we really wanted this to play as a Head and Shoulders, it didn't come into here to test our neckline. And that's the thing about the 1 minute is it gives me far too many setups, far too many entry options that seem quite legitimate, but yet are nothing more than head fakes because the time frame is so short and we're still fighting against a trend. On a 2 minute now, if we could have come all the way down into this line, to the blue line facts, and then come back up and set this shoulder, then I think we have a pretty good potential of that being a trend-changing event. This one, yeah.
I know that Colorado has, skiing bodies, but in New York, our neck is above our shoulder. So if this is the shoulder up here, the neck would be somewhere around here.
Well, no, okay. Well, again, look at your time frame.
Unless we're saying that this is the neck.
Well, now you've got some of them going here, okay? Here now, the one that worked out, the one that actually worked out, we get a bunch of these lines off. The one that actually proved to be the one that worked came here. So our neckline is up here. This is the shakeout here. And this becomes our other shoulder on an inverse. Okay? This is our neckline. So we break, even though we break support, we come back up all the way to a neckline. That shows strength.
I have a question for you.
Okay, because now, and that's the thing of this. Now, okay, and ask me the question. We'll come and look at this again.
It's about that picture right there. I would not consider that a head and shoulder because for that inverted head and shoulder to be, in my definition, head and shoulder,
Okay.
we would have to be on a downtrend. Versus we're up in an uptrend. We're going to see head and shoulder right after this because it's in an uptrend.
I see what you're saying. But can a shakeout happen in an uptrend?
Yes.
So isn't this a shakeout?
That yes, the head and shoulder aspect of it, that wouldn't be something that I would define it. And that would mean it's not, fine. But a shakeout, definitely.
Okay. And actually, guys, the head and shoulders is a shakeout.
Yeah.
That's the definition. And see, the shakeout is just nothing more that traps traders at somewhere. And head and shoulders do it. Breakdown failures kind of do it. Shakeouts typically have a definition of being a longer term event in time, which this one is, as opposed to just a little one breakdown bar. So this becomes a shakeout in the broad definition that this caught a bunch of traders in the wrong place. And that's really all that the shakeout has to do. So as I analyze this facts, and this is all I'm looking at is support and resistance. Okay, we take out support over here, and we turn with we actually turn on support as we look back at more detail on that. So we hold the longer term time frame support. We just break the short term time frame support, which is okay to do if we're trading. And again, with a 60 in an uptrend and a 15 in an uptrend and a 5 minute in an uptrend, guys, you got to be careful that your 2 is going to have trouble fighting those longer time frames. Those longer time frames are going to take a little while to roll over and get going. And so you can expect, until you get your major time frames aligned with you in the up or the down, the counter trend trade against the longer time frame is going to be a little less productive than it would be if you had all the time frames, 60, 15, all of them pointing in the same direction. So this holds the 5 minute support areas, and we get this little shakeout formation. And this thing tells me I've got strength because of this retracement. You know, I would feel differently about that if it couldn't retrace near as far, comes up to the first area of resistance, rolls over here, for example. That would give me a different feeling. But again, guys, in the longer time frame, we just didn't break trend. And we'd have to go and look at a 60 to see, okay, there's our 60, and there's our resistance area. So we were getting into we were trying to get into resistance, but this is what the 60 looks like. And there's nothing in there that tells us a whole lot, really. I mean, that's nothing in there that we would be trading off at that time frame. The 15, though I've got some topping tails, I can see where a guy would be concerned about this. It's just on these shorter time frames.
Because the head and shoulder worked perfectly right after that on the 2.
It did. It just hadn't gone into resistance enough. And that's all I can say is that this exhibited a fair amount of strength in this retracement back up. Now, as we move over, now this is where, again, this is the neckline. If we go back and reevaluate this, there's our head, here's our neckline. We get a retracement back up into a shoulder area. And this one just so happens to actually give us a double top as opposed to a single top. But again, you know, the shorter time frames are going to be a little harder to pick these up. I'd prefer them on, all things being equal, I would prefer to see head and shoulders develop on a 5 minute and then find our entries off the 2. Find our entries off the 1. In fact, on head and shoulders, if I've got a 5 minute head and shoulder such as this, I'm happy with a 2 minute entry. I don't want to get shook out. I don't want to get faked out on a 1 minute entry on these. I think they're a little quick. The 2 minute, at least for me, I prefer to give them a 2 minute on this shoulder over here. And again, I like the second COG, and that one does show up. That one does show up right there. There's our first one hits here, and again, I just find that first one shakes out or doesn't follow through about half of the time. And if I can get a second one, then my odds of that trade go up a bunch. But facts, the only thing is this becomes this little thing, breakdown failure had no follow through. That would be the point of concern. And you can see it now on the 5 quite clearly. Even though we have a double top, we have a failure in the breakdown, and it becomes a shakeout. So you just have to be, you know, this little area. Now I'm looking on the 5. You just want to be careful, and even this one. This is something, guys, that I'll actually trade these if I've got the support or I've got the resistance, particularly with the YM, guys, that's one of the things that the YM does that is a real nuisance, is the darn thing will poke up through the highs and come back in. And that this is an event that sometimes, if I'm feeling lucky and I've had a good day and I want to play with a small entertainment trade, this little failure I'll go long on if I'm still in an uptrend, because the breakdown, if a breakdown, and this is the thing about breakdowns, you guys know how I feel about these things, and these little breakdowns fail so much that, particularly if you're against the trend on a breakdown, that these do little pop down like this, even if it's only 3 or 4 ticks, they have a high frequency, a failure frequency, and you can usually scalp those really quick when they pull up, because a breakdown, if it's going to work, we should hit some stops. And there was just no stops hit on this thing. There was nobody really selling this baby. You're trying to cover a long position here to protect. So there was no stops. And those little those little fakes, those little breakdowns like that, they're fun to, if you're in the trend, those are the things we're looking for. Double bottoms, breakdown failures in an uptrend. And it was actually occurring on a little bit of support. So that would be the only thing. Now, could it have rolled over there? Facts, the answer is yes. It could have rolled over up here. And really, had we had a little different entry bar up here on this top, because literally, oops, let me just clean all these darn lines off. If all we're looking at is this much, the evaluation can be fairly simple in that we broke support, we've retraced, we haven't taken out resistance. So rolling over here, we could anticipate this could go lower. And the only thing I would say is watch these formations and make sure that you don't get caught in these. What it would have been nice is a shock bar right up here. Right up here on number 3, number 4 after the top, and not so far down in here. But I can see what you're looking at, and this could have gone your way. I'm not so sure that it couldn't have gone if it was ready to go. So it wasn't the worst setup in the world, but they just happened. This one was a little cleaner. This one was a little cleaner. And the good part is we had 60-minute resistance up here. This thing just kept bleeding. This surprised me. I actually took this thing long right here. That was so ideal. And you look at it on a 5, it's got a nice little bottoming tail on the 5. There. And I actually saw it off the 5. I didn't see it on the 2. And I took this thing along here. It didn't give me much, because I really thought we'd see a higher retracement on this. Guys, you see this? You see this bar? I know you do. That bar, that retest, that's the picture we're looking for. Even better if it breaks the low of the prior bar. But this is the picture that we're looking for. Double bottom, there's our retest, and cabango. Guys, this is, to me, these just don't fail very darn often. So I love those bars. Now again, this wasn't in great support. I took oil long off of something very similar to that.
In the morning?
This was. Oh no, it was this afternoon I took oil long.
Me too, I took longer, but this morning I took longer on a gap fill because I had to leave, and looks similar to this one that you're saying. I'm sorry, dude.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this didn't come ideally into support. It's in the support area, certainly. but it wasn't ideally down here at these bottoms, and sometimes they just don't get there. But on a 5 minute, guys, that's all the picture I need to get long this contract. Because usually these things will. The two things that happen is you usually don't get stopped for losses on here. You can get stopped out of break even and not make much on the trade, but they'll almost always give you room to get out. And frankly, this bar here was not a good bar. I actually offered out a little bit coming into this and just trailed some out. So it didn't give me near the money I wanted. I was looking how to get back onto this thing, and I didn't actually get back onto it until right at the end of the day. Just before the close, I got back on this, and I ended up stopping out at my entry on half of my contract, and I ended up with the second half +1 is all I could get out of the damn thing. And then I just says, this isn't going, I'm quitting. The setup was there, it just wouldn't move. That's a great looking bar, and if they come back in on you, usually you've got plenty of time to get out without damage. Essentially, that's all you can ask for. If they don't pan out, they usually won't hurt you. So capture that picture. That's the sweet trade, guys. On a 5 minute, that's a good trade. It really is.
And this you're gonna take even if it doesn't take out the bottom of the previous one, it's still gonna take it.
It's still going to be okay. Yeah, if I get a bottoming tail like that, I'm still going to take it. And see, the good part is, this happens frequently, Carol, is that topping tail bar, I don't even care about this bar. I don't even care it's a topping tail bar. Don't even care it closed on its low. And that's primarily because I already have a double bottom going on. And to me, particularly on the 5 minute, and that's taken an hour to develop, a little more than an hour to develop, that's a perfect time frame. And so the fact that I can get through that and this red bar gets ignored is what I expect to have happen. I don't worry that this thing has a topping tail. Especially after this bottoming tail, this retest occurs. I could care less if this is a topping tail now. This is the message that I'm keyed in on, that I want to see, is that bar. That's the one I love to see. So with that, I'm gonna take those long most all the time, unless there's just something that really just screams, "Don't do it, you big idiot." But usually, you're on a double bottom, boy, you get in their test, and it's worth taking. It really is. It's worth taking. Okay. Anything else, real quick, guys?
So you
Facts.
No, sorry.
No, Carol, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask you, you're not worried if it gets like too late in the day to trade the euro? Because
I had 4 contracts on that, guys. When I tried to take the euro long, it was right here at 90. Let me go over to a 2, because I came in off the 1 and the 2, and this is where I took it, right here. And again, this is where I took it. And when it didn't get moving, I took it right there, and my entry was 93. When this thing didn't get going, it pulled back down, and right in here I said, bull crap, I'm just going to kill it. And I ended up taking it off, and I only took, like I say, I took 4 contracts on this. And I thought, really, had this been a better time of day, I would have taken more. But I thought 4, I can get out of here. I thought I really was looking for this. That's what I thought we could get. And so I wasn't expecting a huge trade out of it, but I thought at least we can get up into the resistance area. And this never ever could really get mustered over this until after the close, and then it took off. So I killed this thing at break even. I lost commission on 2 of them, and I made +1 on 2 of them. So it really didn't cost me anything to trade, but that's all it was there. It just wouldn't go. So, but that's what I was looking for, and I like these little retests. But this was late in the day, and that's why I took it a little bit lighter. I actually only intended to take 3, and I ended up with 4. So I really didn't pay attention to my order entry very close. Okay, guys, let me show you one more thing, and I'm really disappointed with myself on this. And I don't have an answer for this one. I want to go back to the open. And right here, I want to show you this. This was so good. This was just not quite back up the truck, but I had a pretty good load right here. Look at the difference in the time frames. Okay, this is the NQ, and this is the open, right at 7:30 my time. I took this when it broke the low on this shock bar. I took this thing and entered a 10, and that's where my entry here was. I ended up taking off. I ended up taking this thing off over here, and I picked up on part of it. I picked up 10 ticks, and in fact, I killed all of it. That's right, I killed all of it up plus 10, because this damn thing wouldn't give it up. Look how the NQs just didn't look like they were ready to pop. So you come back over here and look at this time frame. Very different picture. And because they wouldn't quit, I thought this is going to come back in on me. I got this bar, and I said, boy, this bottoming tail bar says no, this isn't good. And I ended up having to kill this trade with what was going on here on these NQs. So then the NQs finally got their way, and I didn't get back on. I looked at this and thought, I need to take this. And I didn't do it, guys. I just didn't do it. And this baby rocked and rolled for a long ways after that. And I just didn't get on. In fact, was anybody in the ETR this morning at the open? Danny, where were you?
Yeah, I
typed in. Go ahead.
I was actually looking at. I actually tried to enter the NQs short, and I had a problem with my platform. It refused to take my order, and then 20 seconds later it was gone. But if you look at a 2-minute, but take out the pre-market. If you look at just the market hours.
Yeah. Let me go get a.
If you go to the open.
Let me go get it. Let me go get it real quick.
Now, I don't know how significant that tail is. That's a big tail that you see in the pre-market. But if you look at the market hours, that little doji, the third bar, fails, right? And I was actually looking to enter under that fourth bar.
Right here.
Yeah.
At 60.75 or 60.50.
Yeah, and like I say, I put in tried to put in a stop limit order, and it refused to take it. Whether I must have had my limit the wrong direction or something, I don't know. But then, literally within a few seconds, it was gone.
Yeah.
But would you actually had just said in the room, or it might have been that you didn't like the NQs, which is why you got out of the TF. But is that pre-market tail? Was that what concerned you? Or?
No. What concerned me with the NQs was simply that the darn thing wasn't coming around. The NQs were showing far too much strength at the open up here versus the NQ versus everything else.
See, that tail I think is before the open, isn't it?
No, actually, it's on the open because, gosh, what did I do? Why can't I keep the darn? Did I just get the wrong chart? There we go. Yeah, this is market hours. So this is the open, the first 5-minute bar.
2 minutes. It's 2 minute, right?
Oh, 2 minute. Yeah, 2 minute. This is the first 2-minute bar on the open, or from market hours. And I had the right pattern. I just didn't give it enough time to work. But I did type in, before the open, I actually typed in and said, guys, I think, look for a gap fade trade. And I was looking to fade this gap this morning, and I screwed up the trade. So there you go. Okay, let's get over here and talk about pivot lines. I've got pivot lines here, and I'm going to cut to, I don't use the pivot lines too much, but let me show you a chart that really summarizes, and some days, guys, we just don't get good trades off of pivots. This is, forget this one. I don't want the E-mini, 6E. We can look at the Y, here comes the NQs. But here's what, and you guys, your pivot lines ought to look very similar. The daily pivot is the one that I am most concerned with. There are the other pivot lines certainly are reference points, and I don't ignore them. But here's what I wanted to show you. Okay, here's what I wanted to show you. But I pay a great deal of attention to the daily pivot. The pivot lines are standard deviation lines. That's all they are. And if I scrunch this down, I'm assuming that the day yesterday we had a bigger range than we did. We were up 90 points on the YM compared to today, which was a very small day. So our pivot lines from yesterday are quite spread out. Tomorrow they will not be. They'll be much closer. They're nothing more than a standard deviation measurement from high to low, and your brown line, your daily pivot, is the one in between. Any questions on that, or is that all? You guys knew all that anyway. Yep, everybody's good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. No big issues. But here's what, guys, and this is the thing, and a couple more concepts that work with this. This is the thing that I find to be huge with daily pivots. And even though it's a midpoint, such as this chart, is it didn't respect, and this isn't uncommon, and if we look at these days, we came through this pivot line, this pivot line, without much reference. We popped back up through it without it having a great deal of effect. But now that I have a base up here, and now that I have a pivot line, this becomes a focal point, not only for me, but for other traders as well. This is when the pivot lines become very important. And this is when I sit up and pay attention to these pivots specifically. And this is a great chart in that it shows us a couple of things. And even though we have a higher low here on this 2 minute, we still have not taken out any resistance. Now we've got a little bit of a W bottom we're trying to deal with. But here is our overhead, our serious overhead supply. Because this isn't a pivot to us. This isn't a trend change. Even on 2 minute, we take this out. We haven't changed trends, even though we take this out. You guys know that. We really have to change trends by taking out this higher resistance. So as we come up into the bottom of this base, takes us a half an hour to build this. This is more significant. And now we say, it did get through here, so I wouldn't be excited to take the first COG up here. I wouldn't be so excited about, but I would be excited to take the second. And this even gives us a shock bar. So what I'm looking for on the pivots, guys, is once we break and we're in the downtrend, and again, this is only a downtrend, a downtrend or an uptrend in the trend trade. And what I'm really wanting to see is I like to trade around these pivots when I have other congestion or reference points that coincide or support this area as resistance or as support. So as we look at this thing, and I'm looking at the one, sometimes I'm looking at the 100 tick. and I'll watch this for 2 little pushes into this pivot line, and then I'm going to take the trade if it's in the trend. And the sweet part is, guys, look, we've got the tick diversions. We have really all the components of the trade that we want are here. Now, remember how I said I like shock bars that form fairly quickly after the top? This is one. So, as we look at this shock bar, the entry called entry 2, this is the shock bar that I like to see forming up here near the top. These are really high odds entries, guys, and if you watch for these things, and if you say, I demand this second entry, you're going to miss it part of the time, and you're just not going to get it. But when you get this, you can trade this with pretty good confidence and a fairly good lot. They just don't fail much when you get this combination. But the secret to this is these pivot lines. You can actually sell into these pivot lines as you see this top developing. I'm not necessarily going to wait for a 2-minute break. There's a number of times that I will sell right into this. A couple of ticks, 1 tick below this pivot line, I'm going to say, particularly if I've got a topping tail and I'm coming back into it, I will watch 100 tick and see that I get a topping tail, but I don't necessarily have to wait in this environment for me to break a 2-minute low. I want to kind of be into that a little quicker than that. 2 reasons is if it works the way I think it is, I've got a great entry, and if it fails, I've got a really tight stop. But I'm not taking these on the first poke in. I'm looking for my second push into the pivot to get on it. That helps. That increases the odds tremendously, and particularly if we're lucky enough to get a divergence like this.
Gil, can I ask a question?
Please, Dave.
If you took that pivot line and moved it up 10 or 20 points, or moved it down 10 or 20 points, would that change? Like, would that still be a good entry just due to the chart pattern? Or
No, I would not as much. Not on a midpoint pivot. If I haven't got a reference point here, then I'm really not excited about taking. Or when I say that, if I don't have congestion to the left of me here, I'm not real excited about a midpoint pivot. Now, an S1 or an R1, yes, those are a little more potent than I find that they're a little more potent, and I don't feel bad about trying to trade around those. Guys, I have not had good success trading around these midpoint lines without having some other congestion or some other reference point to work off of. So if it's out there all by itself, I'm really not going to be excited about doing anything until I see how prices act.
Yeah, actually, I meant the opposite. So the pattern's still there, the pivot's not there. Like, that would still be the pattern. Because of the resistance to the left.
Heck yes, Dave. Absolutely.
So the pivot in this case is just another amplifier for you.
It is. I wouldn't, guys. Anytime I get a top line, even without resistance. If we look at this little setup over here to the right, on the right side, the little double top called entry number 1. I get this setup, and really, guys, depending on what the internals look like and everything else, my internals are at my back. I don't mind trying to take these a little fairly quick on this early one, but if I'm at all wondering, and if I'm waiting, and often, and half the time or more, I will wait for this other entry. Even without resistance up here, I get a second entry like the shock bar, and I'm taking it anyway. Because this is the retest I'm looking for. This is enough retest to say this baby's going to fail now. Let me go pull a chart up. Let me see if I can find it. I just had it here. Let me just go see if I've got it right close. Nope. Nope. Boy, that's not it. It had an ideal. It had an ideal shock bar entry like this after the top, and it actually occurred on a top with and just to give you an idea, the top looked much like this, but we didn't have any congestion close to the left. It was a long term, like a 15 or a 60-minute pivot, as I recall, that we were up against, and there was quite a bit of distance between it, a day or so between the prior resistance area. But it gave me this kind of a top, and then it gave me a 1-minute shock bar over here on the right, and it was a great trade. But I wanted to show that to you, and I'm not seeing it right now to show it to you, so I wish I could. But that's the gist of that. So with this, guys, and there were some things that happened today, and let me just go change screens. And I want to go to 4. Here we go. Let's go over here and look at what was going on today. And this is one of the things that I really hate when I get in an environment like this. And let me pull all these. I'm going to scrunch them. And this is basically the 4 contracts from the start of the morning through the end of the day. 5-minute chart. And look how strong in comparison the YM was to the other contracts. We gapped up a little bit higher, but the YM barely broke and turned green or turned red today. Just barely. And this is what YM does: it'll break a pivot by a few ticks and then get going and then come back in. Well, the other contracts, they came down to other areas. In fact, the blue lines that you see here are long-term 15 or 60-minute pivots on these charts. You remember how I draw lines on my charts from longer time frames? That's what this blue line here at the bottom of the NQs is. That's what this blue line over here on the ES is a prior pivot. That's what this blue line on the end, the TF was, when the TF went through yesterday's low. So we look at these on a day chart, and now we've got a whole different picture from the TF, the Russell, versus the NQs, or the YM, more particularly the YM. Let's let them update just a second. Now, this is an ugly day bar on the Russell, but it's not so ugly on the other bars. Really isn't that ugly on the other bars, but the Russell is a very ugly bar on a day bar. But point is, as we look at these things, I made a short story very long, but the issue is that typically, as we watch the YM, as we watch the ES, if we can't lose the daily pivot with pretty good force, and if we push through the daily pivot, the other contracts are going to come back through it too. In the case of the YM showing the strength it was showing, it's not surprising that the ES was able to come back to its pivot and actually get pushed through. The NQs did the same thing. Now there was news right here. I know that, and then certainly that's what helped. But the fact that we had that much strength in the YM, the other markets were not, really weren't showing the same strength. it's not uncommon for one of them to hold it up, and this daily pivot becomes that instrument oftentimes, where they tend to gravitate towards those daily pivots, either above or below. So if we're below them, they tend to work their way back up to them. And if we're range bound, or if we're on a day like today, it's not uncommon to work down to them and find them bouncing off. So if the ES will take out a daily pivot, it's usually, and then go through it, usually the other contracts are going to come with it. The YM, I just don't put near as much stock in the YM as I do the NQs or the ES. But today it was the one that the dog that led the tail, or that wagged the tail today, and we just couldn't get any weakness in the YM.
What's in the Russell that I notice most of the time it's with the market, but there's times where several 5-minute bars in a row, it actually does the complete opposite of the other contracts.
It does. And Dave, I actually did, a while back, I did a little, when I was curious, I did a little search and found out what was in the Russell. And there's a lot of stuff. It's fairly broad-based, but mid to smalls. Not a lot of large. Mid to smalls are certainly there. And a pretty good spread of industries. But I find that, go ahead.
It doesn't move with, like I thought with the small caps, maybe it would move with gold or oil, but it doesn't seem to do that either.
It doesn't. There were times, guys, when, and this is what markets do, and particularly with these other contracts. And right now, it's rather frustrating to me because oftentimes we'll see contracts that will link up and move together. In that, at times I've seen the NASDAQ and the Russell really mirror and copy one another because they're the two that are most alike. It's really not happening so much now. I find it collectively these things are basically doing the same things for the most part. So I'm not seeing the real hip to hip link up between the Russell and the NQs that I have seen in the past. But in addition to that, I'm not seeing the connection with the dollar and the markets. I'm not seeing the connection with oil in the markets. I'm not seeing the connection with the euro or the yen and our markets. Right now, there's a lot of stuff that's just disjointed, and they'll be on track for one day, and then the next day they're just like completely ignorant to other contracts, and that'll change from time to time. So the story behind that is don't get too fixed on having to have the same contract mirror another. While it works, keep an eye on them, and while it works, trade with it. But expect at some point it will quit working, and they always do. Sometimes it's the bond yields that you can look at the 10-year, and they'll work very, very closely in the 10-year. That's not really happening right now either. Now the euro and the dollar are pretty close, and they have been hit together as well, and are still linked fairly well. But boy, I'm not seeing a great correlation between a lot of the other markets. Not right now. Are you guys finding anything?
I did notice what you said, that sometimes the Russell and the NQs are together, and the YM and the ES can be separate but together, like separate from the Russell and the NQ.
I like to trade the Russell when everything else is looking much the same. Now this morning the ES and the Russell looked a fair amount the same, but when the NQs didn't, it got me nervous. Because really, guys, the open is a great time to catch a quick trade, and particularly when you get a breakout failure, breakdown failure, that sort of thing. A lot of the stuff that's on the books is starting to get settled, and there's some confusion right there at the morning. Everybody's not flying together, and then it's easy to usually get a nice trade from a quick failure at the open. But where everything wasn't kind of working together, it just made me leery, and I got gun shy of sticking it out. But the ES and the Russell didn't look that much different. It was just the darn NQs that didn't look good comparatively. Okay, guys. Again, these pivot lines. In short, here's in order of reference or preference to me. The daily pivot is number one. It's kind of the king, and I pay a great deal of attention to it. And it tends to be the magnet that draws the other contracts to it. If one will break the pivot line, YM or ES will break the pivot line, or the NQs will break its pivot line, it's not uncommon for the other ones to try to do about the same thing. So kind of even though one's showing the strength and one's showing the weakness, they tend to do that. The S1, R1s become the next focal points. Midpoints, not so much for me, but the R1s or the S1s become focal points, and particularly as we get down into the S2s and 3s, you can often trade off of those. Not so much that they are magical or they are weak or that they're so special, but guys, by the time we get into a 2 or a 3 or a 4, we're starting to get extended. And it's not uncommon for us to see those hold. In fact, look at the Russell. The Russell held S2 this morning on its lowest low. It came right to S2. And I suspect, if we go and look, it was below normal support. I'd move that line off. Well, there was congestion in there, so I guess I shouldn't say that. There was congestion in the Russell here in that S1 area, and that helps, and that certainly lends to that. And there was a pretty major tick divergence in the longer time frames. We had a tick on the MIS5. Yeah, we did. Look at the 5. As it came into its low point, we were getting a pretty good tick divergence on this run into the bottom. Now, guys, when you see this is the key. And we talk about, and I hate this terminology. I really do. It makes me want to reach through the computer and strangle the jerk who says this, that cut your losers short and let your winners run. And to me, that I hate that phrase. But what? Because there's no way of knowing which are which, but these are the ways that gives us an idea when we're running out of gas and when we're getting too far down the road, particularly on a 5-minute. We get these kind of divergences, and in fact, now we get a little breakdown on. This ends up being a little breakdown. We've got 3 bars here that are all the same low, and then we get a breakdown. Not quite 3, but pretty close. We get a little breakdown failure here on a 5 with this tick divergence. The guys, you got to know that the trade's over when this occurs. These are the telltale signs that says this trade is rooted over and I need to be cutting back, tightening my stops, taking something off of this. Don't ride these. I mean, if you were in this trade the whole time, you picked up from, if you were smart enough to keep the dang thing where I shorted it, because I picked this thing up here at 98.10. It came down to, what did it come down to? And of course, I don't know that I've ever been able to hold this that long. 98, and if you'd have come out there at 70, 77, it's 20. That's 20 points. That's 200 ticks. I would have never stayed in it that long, honestly, guys. I would like to tell you I'm smart enough to do that, but I don't think I would have ever stayed in it that long. But having said that, if you were to trail pivots on a deal like that, and had our longer time frames been in a downtrend where I'd have been comfortable trailing pivots, then I could have stayed in something like this. But the point is, there's signs, and these are the things we need to recognize, that this trade is waning. That this trade is about over by the time this bottom occurs. Those are the things that keeps us out of trouble.
Yeah.
Guys, does this sink in?
Can I ask something else? You,
Go ahead.
yeah, like I took the YM right there because it was the strongest, and I like the setup because there was a tick extreme and there was a tick extreme. I mean, divergence. I'm sorry. And
You took the YM long?
yeah, but this is like my second YM trade in 2 years. I'm afraid of YM. Yeah, do you think was the best trade to take? Because I think was the strongest, and I
It
hate to
was.
pick bombs.
You know, it was. If you were going to do that, you took the best trade. Um, Obviously, because you just explained it to us. It would have been if that's the trade you want to take. Because yes, here's the bottom. Let this darn thing load. Here's our bottom. And you can see there was a gorgeous tick divergence as we came in here. Very nice tick divergence here. And I suspect the volume was falling way off. Well, not so much. Well, this last little volume bar sure didn't have follow through. That's a good sign. This ultimate low had very little volume. And even this bar, this retest bar, had very little volume. That's another good sign. But the short answer is it's great looking trade. And again, if you scalp these, you know, there's nothing wrong with scalping these things when you get this set up. After you get the other contracts down to the long-term support, which the NQs were bouncing perfectly off of some long-term support. ES was only a couple of ticks off of some long-term support. And so for this to turn here makes perfect sense. You've got the setup, you can scalp it and then manage it and see where you go. Would I have expected to go back this high? No, but if you're managing it, if you have a way to manage it, you know, why? Why not just let it go and see what you get? There's your 5 minute. And you don't lose a 5 minute until actually right here. It's your first 5 minute bar. You lose.
I got out before the announcement.
That was right before the announcement? Yeah.
Yeah, I got out before. You can get hit very bad, you know, on this announcement. It's like
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. But no, that's a great trade, Carol.
But YM, I don't know how to trail the YM because it's very hard for me. I don't know how to do it.
It is for me, because the darn thing will pop down like this,
Yeah.
and take out a 5 minute low, and then turn around and come back in. And for me, I just find it very frustrating because it breaks too many of my little rules. And I find I get stopped out of a move, and then it only continues. And I don't get that quite as much on the NQs or the ES or the Russell as I do on the YM. And I've just developed a real hate relationship with this contract over the years.
But you know what I did? Instead of trailing it when it broke the pivot, the PP, the daily pivot, I just went to walk the dog and let it go because I'm not serious, because I knew if I watch it, I'll get out early anyway. So it's
Yeah.
a good way.
That's a good trade. That's a good trade. So, you know, is this trade for everybody? It doesn't have to be. Just because this trade works, it doesn't have to be your trade. It certainly would be one, again, that we would question whether or not we want to be short this thing any longer. You don't necessarily have to feel like you need to be taking these long. These are counter trend scalps, and today it worked. Some days they don't. So if you have the right setups and all of the rules apply, then I think you're safe to take them. If you don't see the rules that you want to see, you know, there's a nice, you look at this on a 2 minute. There's a nice retest. Does it satisfy, you know, look at this tick divergence. Does it satisfy your requirements? Yes or no? And if it doesn't, don't do them, guys. Again, you know, you've heard me say this. The good traders take the same setups over and over and over again, and they don't really get out of their comfort zone to try to trade too many new contracts or too many new setups. They just take the ones that know that has super high odds, and they wait for them, and then they don't do anything until it occurs. So, again, that's the important part about your plan. Having those rules and waiting for those rules to be completed. There is, guys, one more thing. We didn't see it today, and I don't think. Well, it was sort of there on the ES. One of the things that I do kind of like about the daily pivot works better than others sometimes. Don't really see it here either. Okay. Here's the retest into again on the ES. Here's the retest into a pivot line. Once we break it, we come back into trade it here. And it only really works, guys, because we've got this congestion over here. But this is the amplifier. What I wanted to mention is, oftentimes, once we trade up through it, okay, I'm looking for a little pullback back to it, and then to go on again. This doesn't really do it today, and oftentimes it doesn't. But if you can get that, this is where I like my 100 tick, my 1 minute, particularly if I break it fairly well. If I've got a good break through the pivot, it will come back down to my pivot. I will buy on that pivot. I need to be in the trend, obviously, and usually that's the case. But if you can punch through them, guys, watch this pivot for support. We didn't get it today, and you don't get it all the time. So the condition is there if it exists. Don't manufacture a trade if you don't get all of your requirements. And when it's going through the pivot up and down, I just don't pay the pivot any real consideration when it's acting the way the ES was today. The NQs almost did that, I think, on this break. Yeah, they did. They sort of did. Wasn't perfect. I would have liked to see them come right into the pivot. This may have been a little harder to get onto.
What he wants.
The 1 minute gives you a little better picture of that. And there's your tick divergence. And there's your retests. You actually have 3 of them on the 1 minute. These things are really pretty consistent. Again, ideally, it'd have been nice if it would have come down a little closer to your pivot line, because your support's over here too. You've got this base below that, and that's why this becomes even more significant to me. It just chose not to come in there. But the conditions exist. And when we're coming into reference points, if you're short or if you're long, you got to be looking for these ticks.
3 apartments and 3 in Brazil, and you still cannot spend it. You understand? If you think, of course, you can always spend it.
Any questions, guys?
Yeah, I have one question.
Please.
How can we win the jackpot of the lottery tonight? It's $355 million.
Do you know anybody that works the lottery you can bribe?
Actually, you should do like the guy that, those guys got busted for winning the $1 million Triple Crown.
No, what happened?
They, one of the guys worked in, Flow TV. So what they did was, they knew that the main office had a delay of like 15 minutes between the time that bets are last one where he bet every single horse that ran, and he won like $2 million. And what he did was he got his his college fraternity friend to actually place the bets and go in and collect. Now I have to tell you that I saw the show on True TV, so they got busted anyway. But things like that are able to be done.
Good.
It actually would be too much of a headache. Can you picture if you won all that money, what you would do? You wouldn't be able to come in and trade every day.
Yep. Guys, I didn't have a whole lot more with these pivots, unless there were things that you wanted to cover. But the point is, no, not that one. Guys, if we didn't get it, there, take a picture of this. If you've got this one, grab a picture of this chart.
Before we leave, I'll tell you, when we're all finished, I'll tell you a lot of what you
Okay. Y'all got that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I'll close it. Keep that as part of your, again, how you do that's up to you. I as you guys know, I keep, there we go, folders of various different patterns, and it ends up in my chart review folders, so I can look at these periodically.
Huh.
Now, did you guys notice there was yesterday, Dave and I were talking, and it didn't work out as well as I had hoped, but there was a fairly good tick divergence, or up-down, or a BOLD, up-down volume divergence to the positive. And I know Dave and I were trying to get long, and the markets just didn't give us. We had the setups, we had the conditions. They just couldn't get going yesterday, and we had some okay trades, but not some great trades on the long side yesterday on little failures, because the up-down volume was holding pretty tough all day. Numbers weren't quite as strong as I would have liked to have seen them. We didn't get above 400,000 at lunch. We were down around 250, which isn't quite as strong as I would have liked to have seen. We only finished the day, at the end of the day, up plus 600, which is really part of the reason we didn't get quite the push that we should have, or we were hoping to get. But we had a nice up-down volume divergence yesterday where it was positive, and the markets were working a little lower.
You know what I noticed, Neil? If I'm remembering the right time, I think all the other internals were not necessarily bearish, but like the trend was rising, like they weren't sort of confirming, like they were kind of like going in the opposite direction where you'd want to see them.
Yeah, they were a little neutral and to bearish, and normally that'll fix itself if we can get that up-down volume a little higher than it was. And because of the combination, I don't know if it was the up-down volume not being high enough to get the other ones in shape, or if the other ones weren't in shape and that didn't allow the up-down volume to get where it needed to be. But regardless, because of the fact that we couldn't get the strength across those various indicators, we just didn't get the follow-through that we were hoping for. But we had the potential. We had the part of the environment, and so it was worth trying to be thinking we were on the right side of the trade. We just, one of those days that they just didn't work very well. So again, if you're on the right side, that's the most you can ask for, and then just hope that the trading gods don't frown on you. Okay, guys, I don't have anything else today, but I do want you to do I've got time to go through one more trade if anybody wants to do it, but I do want you guys to kick me back some of the subjects you want me to cover, and we can do this. We've got time. We can take a class or two and cover specifically some detail on whatever it is. So give that some thought through the night or through tomorrow, and then reply back to me.
I have one that you're very good. Inside bar, shock bar, fair shock bar, and baby bars. You're the best. If you can go over them.
Baby bars.
Yeah.
All right.
My list is too long. I'll have to email it to you.
Okay. Baby bars are a lot like Jose's pause bar or stabilization bar, as he calls them, and they're good little bars to watch for. And we'll cover. I wrote them down, Carol. So we'll get those thrown into one of these lessons. Now, Thursday, we're gonna go at 10 or at noon, and it's not a great time per se. Market time, but we're gonna go through oil, and that'll be a fun session. Now, I do this with you guys only because we're going to throw away a bunch of the rules that we had before. We're going to throw away a bunch of rules and start with some new ones when it comes to oil.
Wow.
Because it has its own dang rules. At least I find that I trade it quite well if I follow its rules and not my E-mini rules. And literally, I have a whole new set of rules for the oil that I don't use on E-minis.
Neil, do you ever use? I know you don't like moving averages to trade off of. Do you ever use one though to manage a trade? No. Okay.
I don't. Again, I'm looking at support and resistance. What's it doing? What's my ticks doing? What's all the stuff that we go through. What's the bar itself doing? The moving average, they're just too subjective. And on these short time periods like this, I watch them on my dailies. I know the 20, the 50, the 100, the 200, they carry weight on the dailies. A little bit on the 60s, but on these short time periods, I just haven't found them to be reliable enough for me to give them any credit. And I've watched them a little bit, and just don't watch them anymore. I have found that they created a bias that wasn't real too much, more often than they were good. So I don't use them for even managing a trade. I have found some traders that have found it to keep straight early on. Above the 20, we're looking long. Below the 20, we're looking short. And sometimes that's an aid to let them keep on the right side of the trend. But after a while, once you get to read price, support, resistance, you don't need that to tell you where the trend is, because sometimes they can be wrong. And if you evaluate your trend by pivots and support resistance, then you're never really wrong. Oh, excuse me. Okay, guys, that's that's all I've got. So let's see your charts. And here's the thing the other thing I'm seeing is I know you're sending me your best trades, but if you have one that blows up on you, send that to me as well. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sometimes we learn the most from the trades that fail the most. And most of these trades that you guys are sending me are textbook. They're perfect. And if you just did those trades all day, you'd never need to talk to me. You wouldn't need any assistance. You guys would be creaming it. So we all get screwed up once in a while. So send me a rec as well.
All right.
or if you already know what you did wrong, maybe there's no need. But if there's some things about them that you're curious about, you're thinking that, what did I do wrong, and why didn't this work as well as it should have? We can look at those. Okay, guys, until Thursday, you guys be careful, and let's see. It'll be interesting to see how this market holds up the next few days. And let me know if anything's up in between, and I'll watch for your emails, and then we'll talk on Thursday at noon.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Hey, thanks for everybody.
I think